Central Florida.
Okay, I'll actually be in Florida in about 4 days.
Okay. We just
We
moved back down from Virginia, so I was up there
okay.
for the last 8 years.
Wow, interesting, cool. I haven't spent a ton of time in Virginia. Been there a little bit, but we do our like most people that live in the South, we do our yearly Florida vacation,
Wow.
in that, like, 30A Destin area, so we'll be down there for
Yeah,
a week, and I cannot wait, but
I bet.
no. Well, TK, I'm super excited to talk with you for many different reasons. I love your background, your professional background, as my mother's actually been a cardiology nurse for, gosh, 20, 25 years now. So when I
Nice.
saw your background, I was like, oh, super cool. And then I also love a good thriller book. And so I'm excited because I feel like your book is one that both my wife and I will probably fight over to read
Uh,
first and share. And I know a lot of other people that enjoy these type of books as well. And so TK, just again, super excited to talk with you and would
yeah,
love to just give you the mic for a second and
okay.
just share a little bit about yourself, your career, and a little bit about your writing, because from what I've read, you've always enjoyed writing, but now you've got a book coming out here in just a few
Yeah.
short months. And so just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, well, thank you, Chris, for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Like you said, I have been writing a long time, for as long as I can remember. I was that kid that they said, "What do you wanna be when you grow up?" I knew, I'm gonna be an author. In fact, I think at that age, I was saying, "I'm gonna be a famous author," so I was very confident. That confidence starts to go up and down as you get older. But, yeah, so I've been writing a long time. I was a whiz at just, like, editing. Like, I used to edit the notes passing stage where we used to pass notes in class before, cell phones and all of that, and I remember I would edit my friends' notes when they passed to me. It was just always in my head. I don't know, I just did it, I couldn't help it. If I saw words spelled wrong, I was in spelling bees and all that kind of stuff, and I just loved words and, reading, and I learned how to read at a very early age also. My mom was very on me about learning how to read, and I loved it, so, that was my life, and I thought, "I'm gonna grow up and be an author, and cool, end of the story," but, life doesn't happen that way. So somewhere in my 30s, I ended up in the medical field, and the way that kind of happened is let's see, I was probably in my 20s, maybe a little bit before that, because I had my first daughter. I had her at a younger age. I was 21 when I had her. And my first medical job was actually the back office stuff. I think it was like I volunteered to help move files from one medical office that was moving into another building. And I thought, well, this is easy. It's filing, paperwork, office. Which the other kind of cool thing about that is also when I was younger, I used to actually play office. Like we had this, those little keyboards, the little, like, I don't know, the little tiny keyboards that used to have for kids, and that was my typewriter. So I was either pretending to write books or I was working in my little office, and I'd have my stuffed animals or my brothers and sisters. I'm the oldest, so, I tortured them with that and made them sit in my office and and play along. So aside from me knowing I was gonna be an author, I also knew that I really liked, like, I don't know, desk office stuff, but I didn't really know what it was called then. So when I got in the medical field and I was doing that file stuff, I really liked it, and I thought, "Well, this is cool," and it was paying more than the minimum wage, which was, we won't discuss what it was at that time, so I'm not gonna age myself. But at the time, it was pretty good, and I had heard that once you kinda get your foot in the door, medically speaking, that you're kinda set for life, basically, there's always a job. And so I did that job, and then I ended up getting hired on, and I did over the course of the next 10 years, medical office, medical records, front desk, medical secretary. I just kinda stayed in that genre, and after a while, I kinda wanted behind the scenes. I thought, "Oh, I wanna get in on the action." So, I decided to go back to school, and, I went to school for radiology, and I thought at the time that ultrasound and radiology were the same thing. Kind of, it's all imaging, but totally different, degrees. I thought, "Well, I still kinda wanna learn it," and it was fun. I thought it was fun because as a radiographer, you have to be creative, and I am a very creative person, so for me, it was like I had the best of both worlds. I get to do this, I get to be in the medical field, I get to have a good job, but I also get to kind of be creative and think outside the box. And so I did that for a very short amount of time before I heard about the cardiology field. It was kind of a passing conversation. Someone was walking by, and I'm not gonna lie, the first thing I heard was, and I don't know if I lost the connection there. Are you still there?
Yeah, it went away a little bit.
Oh,
I
okay. Sorry, I was just rambling on, and then I saw the connection was not there.
No, you're good. And like I said, I can edit all of this out where it plugs off. So
Okay, cool. So I was just saying that I lost my train of thought now. I was saying that, yeah, so the medical field. So I went to school for that. And then I heard about the cardiology, about cath lab, actually, interventional. And I thought, I don't remember what it is about it. When I heard it, well, I thought, I want to do that. Because once I actually started training for it, I thought, have I lost my ever loving mind? Because this is insane. Like it was the hardest thing I ever had to learn. I mean, and the group of people that I was training under, they were like old school, like, "You're gonna learn the way we learned."
yeah, yeah.
I felt like they were just out to torture me on purpose. But luckily, I had a really good director, and he's like, get learn what you need to learn out of this. And then he told me go to another lab, see about it. And I was sure after I left that job, I was never stepping foot in another cath. And luckily I did. I did end up once we moved to the DMV area, and I went back in, and luckily I did, because when I went into a new lab, I mean, the doctors were great, the staff was great, and I really started to learn at that point, and I wasn't terrified that I was going to do something wrong. And it just became a new love. And so basically what was happening throughout this whole stretch of the medical career was I was still writing in the background, but it was like I was learning a new thing, and it was a new, life change. I'd had my children, and then I'd gotten married, and I got divorced, and then, I had another, and it was all these little things. And then I was, in school, and then training for a new career. So writing just kind of became a thing in the background. I was still kind of writing in my journals, and writing stories, on the side, but it wasn't really at the top of, my priority list. And when I got in cath lab, I absolutely loved and hated it at the same time. I loved it because I love to help people. That's one thing I did love about the medical field. I love helping people, and, helping people feel better. It's just always been a joy of mine. And I guess that goes hand in hand with writing. I like to entertain people, mostly in the background, but I'm getting used to being a little bit more upfront.
Yeah.
And, so it was kind of the best of both worlds, but it was very difficult. It was very challenging, very demanding, very stressful. I mean, psychologically, mentally, physically, but it's just something about it just kept me coming back. Like I couldn't get enough of it. And I've just recently kind of stepped away from that to do writing full time. And there's a piece of me that I feel like I'm missing, but it was a good call. And I now incorporate my experience and my knowledge from medical field and from my experience in cath lab into my writing. And even though my writing is, I don't write like I think medical fiction. I just think that I kind of have a little piece of it in my stories, just as kind of like this is a background that I know. But the real heart behind my stories actually are based on like a lot of relationship drama and things from my past. And I realized that's where a lot of my stories were being crafted, was from that. And so it just became like a niche because I was in cardiology, and I thought these are matters of the heart, and I worked with physical heart. So that's kind of how my brand got created. And yeah, so now that I've said all of that, and I will talk your ears off, so you'll have to stop me.
No, I love that, TK. And I mean, there's a lot I think just thinking about as you're talking. One of them is I can only imagine how hard it is to balance everything. Cause I remember as a young kid is when my mother went back to school, and I just remember her studying so much at night, just like how much commitment she had to do with me and my sister, two young kids. So I can only
Mhm.
imagine. I know I wasn't studying, but I could see how hard that was, and I can imagine you trying to figure out a time to write, like, you don't have time, it's
No,
something you gotta put on the back burner. But I'm curious to know, so we've got your debut novel, I don't even know if we said the title, Unveiled, which
Unveiled, yeah.
comes out, I believe, in September, is that right?
It's actually October.
So
I think the date actually got moved a couple of times, just for marketing purposes. We're kind of trying to market it a little bit more, and October seemed like the better date for it to come out, kind of, against the I forget the wording they told me, but it's kind of there's a date in September where a lot of books come out, and then there's that October date because it's a thriller, I guess. I had a lot of people tell me different things about why it should come out in October, so we kind of all settled on that, and that's kind of what happened there.
Yeah.
But yes, October 6th.
I could see where that's a good fall, spooky-ish kinda time to sit down and read that type of book, so maybe there's some correlation there.
Yeah.
But TK, how long of a process? Because I mean, again, you've been writing, you've been taking notes, you've probably got all kinds of stories and things that you've gone in different directions with, but putting this debut novel together, what was the process timeline like? What was the process of actually I don't know, I don't know the whole process of how you get a book to a publisher and the market and all of that, and you're doing all this while working too, so you've got a lot of things you're balancing, but, like, go through the timeline a little bit of when did you start the story? How long did it take you to complete it? And then the process of actually editing it, getting it out there, getting a cover, like the total time frame of it all. What all did that look like?
So the base of this the story idea I think I've had for a while. I actually had started a different story before this, and it's on the shelf. Let's just put it that way. And so I really liked the idea. Some of the characters I kind of really wanted to, I wanted to keep them, but I knew that that wasn't the right story, and so I did a totally new story, which became Unveiled, and so, but I kind of it's interesting. So, long story short, I had to try to merge these characters into from 2 different stories, so that was a little confusing at first. I confused myself, I made it harder on myself. But the start of that from when I wrote chapter 1, that was October of 2023. And so I guess I probably started the outline maybe a couple months before that. But that was also the fall after I had gone to my first writing conference. Because the thing about my writing is I've always kind of done it solo. Like I've done it with myself. A very, very small amount of people have read, things I've written, like close family, friends, and they're the ones that are kind of pushing me to write. And so I'd never been to a conference. I'd never taken, I'd taken courses like online and everything. But when I went to this conference, that's when I started learning about genres and publishing and all these things that you have to do. And then the big thing at that time was you have to have a platform. I'm like, platform, what does that even mean? Okay, we'll worry about that later.
Yeah.
So I gosh started working with a mentor, and that was the spring of 20. Was it spring of 22? Because I got married in 22, so maybe it was probably a little bit after that. And she really started working with me on crafting this novel. And at first, I was really excited. I was working on it, and I think I finished the first draft in 8 months because I finished it in June. And I was so excited. I thought
Done.
it was unreal. Like, I even put the end, even though I know I was going to take it out later, but I have to put the end and tell everybody I finished my first book. But I've been telling people I was writing for years. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a book. And even now, when I had to push my date, I said, people are going to be like, yeah, okay, listen, sure, you're writing a book. There's always some reason why it's not out
Send
yet.
it to me when it's done.
Exactly. So that started. So then this October, with it being published or releasing in October, that would be a total of 3 years from the start of the chapter to finish. But the first draft was written in 8 months. And I guess the reason after that it kind of took some time is I wasn't really full on writing. I wasn't really working on the edits and everything because at the time I was working full time and it was very difficult to kind of stay focused with that. I had just gotten married the year before and 2 years before that was the pandemic and we had a blended household. He had 2 kids, I had 2 kids. We had 2 A personality boys and so I'll let you have your imagination of how that went. And so there's all these things going on in our lives that it just kind of made writing kind of seem like it was getting pushed, and it just kept it was just on my heart so much, like, it just became like people say, like, there's this fire inside of you, and it was getting stronger and stronger, and I was like, me and my husband talked about it, and he said, "Well, what if you kinda lessen your work hours?" So I was actually lucky enough to go down to part-time work, but even still in cath lab, even part-time is a little crazy, there was still call, I had to be on call, and the lab I worked in was an hour away. It was a commute. So if I was on call, I had to stay over there. So I just tried to kind of incorporate my writing into those break times. If I was waiting to, get called in, or sometimes I would take my notebook to work and just kind of jot notes in there. And, so I was still feeling like I was doing something. But that whole editing process, I feel like it kind of took a little bit of time. And also, I learned a lot about writing while I was crafting this novel, and things I thought, I've been writing my whole life. I got this. No, it's not as easy. I don't care if you've been writing your whole life. Writing a novel is hard. And there was so many times throughout it, as I was doing those edits where I was like, okay, I really thought more highly of myself than, I didn't know this is what I was getting into. And I second guessed myself. And I thought, maybe I'm not supposed to be a writer. Maybe that's why I went into the medical field. So there was a lot of self doubt, a lot of, you know, almost quitting moments. But luckily, I had great support from my family and, close people. And my mentor, she's an amazing part of my life. She kept pushing me and she said, no, you have a good story. You could have a good premise and you just got to stay on it. And she always was encouraging me every time I felt like, this is not it. Like, maybe I'll just write my little short stories and continue on in my career. And so eventually, I was able to finish it. And then once I finished it, I was pitching it at a conference, and I thought, okay, well, now this is another nerve-wracking thing that's, I have to do. Now I have to make someone else think that the story's good enough. And once again, the self-doubts are there, and, are they going to like it? Are they going to read it? Are they going to think this is a horrible premise? And I pitched it to an agent, and she really liked, what she was seeing. And she said, send it to me. And, you never hear back from these people right away. So that's always fun. It's like the waiting game. And long story short, I'm trying to sum it up. But once I did hear back from her, it was actually not bad. It wasn't bad news, but I was a little confused because she said that it was, she liked this, where it was going, because you send them like your first 3 chapters and your whole proposal. And she was interested. However, she said that the publishers that she works with require a larger platform. And so my platform wasn't high enough. And I thought, you got to be kidding me. Like at first, at first I didn't know. And I had to call my mentor and I'm like, is this good news? Is it bad news? Like I'm expecting like a yes or a no, like black and white. Just let me know. So she said, this is actually good news because it means, she's interested. It's just we have to build your numbers. And, I was actually a little frustrated with that because growing up, I was always trying to not have to fit into that popularity group and that group of people that you always have to fit in. I never understood, why do I have to dress this way? Why do I have to wear my hair this way to fit into this group of people? I never understood that. So I was always kind of trying to, do my own thing. But then, you get to high school and college, and then I felt like I was kind of starting to conform a little bit. And it was like this race to always just fit in. And it just became like a part of life that was so unfortunate. And, I struggled with that. And now here I am, 40 something years old, and I'm way past all of that. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Now I got to win a popularity contest again.
Yeah.
Like, how's this happening to me? I was really devastated all over again. And I thought, this is just not for me. At that point, I thought maybe I'll just self publish the book and we'll just see where it goes. I'm going to keep writing. And so shortly after that, it turned out that my mentor she ended up starting her publishing company shortly in that time frame. And I didn't know until after the fact. And then the timing just kind of laid out to where it ended up where she offered to publish my book. And I was at first, because she asked me later, she said, you didn't really seem excited. I said, well, I was just in shock because I went from, well, this is probably not going to happen right now. Maybe it's someday, maybe whatever, to I'm getting published. So there's that little moment of surreal, like I'm going to get published. I've been trying to do this for a long time and it's happening now. And then everything kind of started happening really fast. And then now I have a deadline. I've never really had set deadlines. I've had deadlines, but not really. And so then I had to do the next round of edits, and she sent me this massive, like, I don't even know how many pages of things that needed to be fixed in the story, and the panic set in and I don't know. So that's when I started learning about deadlines and all of that. And then then of course I was even like, maybe we need more time. Maybe we need more time. And so my date to get published did get pushed a couple of times because I thought, no, 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 it's not ready yet. It's not ready yet. So eventually I had to stop editing and say, okay, if I keep touching this book, it's, you can over edit, you can over, do too much. And that was just the end of last year. So it was like the end of probably the mid to the end of last year was just kind of a whirlwind of unexpectedness. And if you would have told me 2 years ago I was getting published this year, I mean, I would have liked to believe it because I tried to think positively, but it was still a big surprise, even still.
Yeah. Well, I'm always highly impressed with people who can write a good fiction novel because I think I'm not very creative. Like, there's no way I could write a fiction novel. It would take me I don't know how long. It's so much easier for me to put facts together and look at statistics and a good self help book or motivational. You can kind of get some material together and put that together rather easily. I feel like structure it a certain way, whatever. But to create a story in your head and get 200-300 plus pages out of a good line of that we can follow and be enjoyed and have a mystery to it. I just find that so impressive, and then probably again just because I'm not that creative, so I'm like, how did they come up with this? Where did these characters come from? But I also think it's really cool that you used your real life, some of the experience of medical field and relationships, and you kind of incorporated that and it kind of sparked your idea. And I'm always curious to ask the timeline question because I've talked with some authors and like the way you write or maybe something you put in the book, it could be because of something that's like happening in your life at that time. So like month 1 to month 8, like was there any difference because of like just again external influences that were happening in your life and maybe change the way or the direction of your book? I always find that fascinating. And I'm always you kind of pulled the curtain back a little bit, and a couple other authors have too, on just the process of publishing a book. I was talking to some author the other day, and it kind of frustrating because if you are a good writer, you sometimes don't get your work published because of the platform issue. It's like, oh, you got to have a minimum of this, and it's like, well, what if the book sucks? It doesn't matter as long as they can like sell the book because of the platform. That's what their motive is, and it doesn't seem like they're really looking for good writers or people that they could promote and their platform will grow because the story's good enough or, the book's good enough. Like, could,
Yeah.
could it be a movie? I don't look further than the numbers, but it just seems like those companies, and I get it, they have to be able to know they can sell and market and cover themselves too. But it is kind of a unique thing to learn about because I don't think people know that enough how hard it is to get a book published. And there's like, oh, you just send in the transcript, work through it, and
No,
you can pay to
not
publish.
anymore.
A little more difficult than that, or a lot more difficult, actually.
Yeah, yeah. I That was definitely, and I laugh because sometimes I'm like, don't these people know that most writers are introverts? Like,
Yeah,
we don't want to be on camera online. Some bunch of people can look at our story. At least that's how I think. And I don't even really think I'm a full introvert, and I still have issues with being on
yeah,
camera and or people listening to the things I have to say. And of course, I think now I'm learning all writers, if not most, if not all, have that sense of what if no one likes my story? And now it's like I've made this huge platform and all these marketing and I've hyped these people up. And then what at the end of the day, they're like, what is this?
yeah,
Can I
yeah,
just stay in the background? And then if they don't like it, they don't really know who I am after
yeah,
that.
yeah.
But I get
No,
it.
but hopefully, the book comes out and it just catches like fire and everyone
Yeah.
loves it and it leads to, another book opportunity and it's all part of the
Yeah.
process. It's
Yeah.
the things you love to do, there's always those little pieces to it that are not enjoyable as well, and I think it's funny even when we started this conversation, how you were talking about just how in tune you were with editing from a young age, just little things. Most authors I talk to, they're like, I hate editing. It's the worst part of the process. I can't stand it. I'm not good at it. But it's kind of funny that you let off with, man, I was editing my friend's notes
Yeah.
before, they reached the person they're supposed to go to, fix the word. So I thought that was very fascinating too, because I've never heard anyone talk about editing that way.
My issue is research. I do not like research. I don't know why though, because I'm the first one. Like, if I don't understand something, even outside my writing, or if I wanna know something, I'm online like crazy, but I don't know what it is about, like, when I'm writing a story and I have to stop, and now I have to research this. It's kind of annoying to me, but, once I get going with it, I get it,
Yeah,
and it can be a little fun, but I think
yeah,
writing is kinda like when I learned, or writing a novel is kinda like when I was learning cath lab, like, I loved it, and it was fulfilling, but also really stressful at times and just, like, hard, like, really hard, like, halfway through, a novel, and I know, an author, you probably know Jerry Jenkins, who wrote, the End Time series, and I listen to a lot of his, talks that he does, and he talks about, like, the marathon in the middle, and when I got to the middle of it, I'm like, "Oh, I get it." This is the part where you're like, "Okay, it's too late to turn back, but I have to get forward," and especially with, this being a psychological thriller, you have the ideas. Like, ideas is never my problem. It's getting them down on paper and making them make sense and then wrapping it up at the end. And I thought, well, let me throw in another plot twist. And then then at the end it's like I have to like solve all this now.
yeah. No, that's
So that,
fun.
yeah, that was a challenge, but it was also fun at the same time.
Yeah. No, I love that. TK, just a couple more questions for you. I'm curious to know, obviously this book, the main purpose is to entertain, have people get into it, love it, feel the characters, feel the environment and go down the story that you're putting out there. But what if, or I guess, what is the message you hope people take away from your book? Is there any sort of underlying things you hope people pick up on, and that it goes a little bit deeper than just being entertained? Is there some messages you hope that sits with people as they read your book?
Yeah, actually there is, and it's actually a theme that I noticed across a lot of my writing. I write a lot about a relationship, things that happen between, people in relationships, and not necessarily good things from, like, past relationship trauma, I guess is a good way to put it, and moving on, and a lot of times, and this comes from even my personal experience of dealing with this and being in, bad or not so great, relationships, and I always had this what if theory, like, what if this had gone differently, or, what if I'd said this or acted that way, and a lot of times I that's what starts the ideas of my stories, and so when I was trying to figure out the why of why I write this way, I realized, this is kind of a sense of therapy, of closure. And I write that a lot of these stories, and even Unveiled, there's a message of kind of forgiveness and grace and kind of being able to confront your past or being able to learn from the things that you've gone through and just getting through them, getting to the other side, forgiving the unforgivable, being able to forgive others, even for yourself, not necessarily for them, but for yourself so that you can heal and move on. And that seems to be the theme of a lot of my stories. I'm thinking maybe there's therapy in it for myself. So hopefully, others can read that as well. And, the psychological part of it is like, well, how far is someone willing to go, or what lines do they not want to cross? That's kind of a hint at the next book, by the way. So this particular book is more about forgiveness and, being able to understand that everybody has a reason for the things they do, and it doesn't always make people bad people. It's just, everybody has their own past, everybody has their own present, and everyone at some point thinks that what they're doing, what their actions are, is right for them. So just getting through that and finding the grace to move on is basically.
Yeah. Love that. Love that. TK, final question for you. And I ask everyone this question that comes on the podcast is just a books for guys recommendation type of question. I'm always curious to know what people are interested in reading or what, some of their books that they've loved to read personally. And so my question to you is, what is a book or two that has meant a lot to you personally or professionally? And what is a book or two that you love to recommend to other people?
I have read so many books, honestly, but there was one particular book that stuck out to me when I was starting my writing journey, and that was Stephen King's book on writing. Now, I don't read Stephen King. Like, I mean, I've watched the movies, but I don't typically read his books, and I don't even remember how I got a hold of that book, but I was so enthralled, and I think I read it twice. The way he talks about how just writing from, not necessarily sticking to those cliches and your everyday things, and he breaks it down so simplistically to where you feel like, yeah, I can do this, I can write. And so that's one book that I recommend. And then on the opposite side of that spectrum would be Cecil Murphy, who also writes a book on writing, and he's more talking about your why. Why do you write the way you write, and writing from the heart and finding out who you truly are as a writer. And so those two books have been really instrumental, and they were 2 totally times in my life that I read them, so, um, yeah, but they've both been instrumental, and there's so many more, but those are the 2 off the top of my head.
Yeah. No, I love that, and there's a lot of writers and authors who watch and listen to this, and so those are great recommendations. I'm sure maybe someone else has read or they are interested in reading because of that recommendation, and so but TK, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, and we're very proud to sponsor your book or
Oh,
promote
cool.
it and show it out there for people. And I can't wait until it's released because it's definitely one that I'm going to read. I feel like my wife's going to read that love this style of book. I know they're going to want to pick this up, and it sounds like you've got other works in in progress already, which is
Yeah.
awesome. So when those books come out, we'll spotlight those too. But TK, just keep doing what you're doing. I can see the passion in it. I see the excitement. You've got it rolling, and I just can't wait to see everything that you accomplish now with this first novel coming out. I just can't wait to see everything that the success that happens from it, and just the continued work you put out. Super excited about that.
Thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate being here. I appreciate your endorsement, and I can't wait to see what happens as well.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate it, TK.
Alright, sounds good.